Robert Browning's The Last Ride Together presents a deviation from the standard Victorian breakup narrative. While the speaker faces a permanent rejection from his mistress, his account of the event avoids the typical hallmarks of romantic grief. Browning, seen here in this 19th century portrait, utilized a specific poetic genre to construct this narrative, the dramatic monologue. The form features a single speaker addressing a silent listener. The objective is to reveal the speaker's internal psychology through their own real-time rationalizations, rather than through external narration. The immediate plot is established in the opening lines. After years of pursuit, the speaker has been definitively rejected, ending the relationship. His response is to calmly request one final physical experience, a last horseback ride together. To his surprise, she agrees. Stanza 1 maintains a rigid rhetorical structure to manage this upheaval. The speaker relies on the sequence of since clauses, since his fate is known, and since his love has failed, to categorize the rejection. This use of anaphora, the repetition of a word at the beginning of successive phrases, mimics the steps of a logical deduction. It processes the emotional loss as a series of settled facts. This analytical approach frames the rejection as the starting premise for a larger intellectual argument, rather than a sentimental lament. As the ride commences, the speaker must neutralize the first psychological obstacle to his composure, the influence of the past. He specifically targets counterfactual regret, the cognitive habit of agonizing over what-ifs and simulating alternate outcomes for past events. Stanza 4 functions as the active mechanism for dismantling this mental trap. He realizes that dwelling on hypothetical actions, had I said that, had I done this, is logically unproductive. A different action might have secured her love, but he acknowledges it have just as easily resulted in her hatred. He severs the connection to these alternate timelines by pivoting to the present tense continuous. Here we are riding. The visceral physical sensations of the ride, the wind and the movement, serve as a grounding mechanism. This sensory input is used to block out both past grief and future uncertainty. By cutting these hypothetical ties, the speaker attempts to prioritize the immediate shared experience over the loss of his long-term hopes. Having stabilized his own perspective, the speaker shifts his focus to the broader context of human ambition in Victorian society. In stanza 5, he introduces what he presents as a universal law of failure. He observes that while all people strive for success, almost no one achieves their original intentions in their words or their deeds. Browning measures this through a specific comparison. He contrasts the minuscule reality of what is actually achieved, the petty done, against the massive scale of the original ideal, the undone vast. This chart represents that discrepancy. Every human achievement is a small fraction of the volume of what was initially envisioned. When measured against the total goal, the actual achievement appears almost insignificant. This conclusion places the lover's romantic rejection within a baseline condition of the human experience. To further validate his position, the speaker creates a matrix to evaluate the rewards of society's most respected professions. He looks first at the statesman, an individual defined by finite action and public leadership. A statesman provides a massive input, a lifetime of political labor, public scrutiny, and constant conflict. The output, the speaker notes, is often limited to a 10-line obituary in a history book that is quickly forgotten. The soldier, represented by this 19th century trooper, provides an even greater input, the sacrifice of his youth and his physical life for the nation. The speaker identifies the physical output of this sacrifice as a flag planted on a literal heap of bones. These martial ambition results in a name scratched into Westminster Abbey's floorstones. These legacies are physically walked over and ignored as time passes. He argues that these worldly rewards are mathematically inferior to the immediate visceral joy of his ride, as they offer a minimal return on the investment of a human life. The speaker moves the comparison from men of action to men of aesthetics, the poet, the sculptor, and the musician. He acknowledges the poet's technical skill in weaving rhythm and rhyme to express complex human emotions. However, he notes that poets often age prematurely and live in poverty, merely describing experiences that the lover actually has. This sculptor, seen in his studio, represents decades of physical toil spent on a single aesthetic goal. The output is a marble Venus, mathematically perfect, but made of cold, static stone. The immobility of the marble contrasts with the physical warmth of the speaker's mistress on the horse. He concludes that the experience of watching an ordinary girl crossing a stream surpasses the static perfection of a statue. Finally, he observes that the lifetime work of a musician is eventually erased by shifts in cultural fashion, as seen in this empty opera house. For the speaker, art is a secondary representation of life. The shared, physical continuity of the ride is the primary experience. The speaker transitions from comparing earthly achievements to exploring the theological implications of his failed romance. He identifies a paradox in the idea of complete success on earth. If fate had granted him perfect romantic bliss during his mortal life, his soul would have achieved its final goal prematurely. Achieving total satisfaction in the temporal realm would, by his logic, remove the need for a rewarding afterlife. This is the core of Browning's robust optimism. The rejection is framed as a deliberate withholding of fulfillment, which ensures the soul maintains an ideal to strive for in heaven. The speaker claims he now has a bliss to die with, an unconsummated desire directed entirely toward the divine. His specific earthly deprivation becomes the mechanism that guarantees a greater reward after death. The poem's conclusion, found in stanza 10, presents a theory on the nature of time. He describes the infinite moment, a profound psychological state where extreme emotional intensity halts the linear passage of time. The speaker uses this state to collapse the boundary between the mortal and the immortal. He postulates that heaven is the eternal perpetuation of this exact ride. As the timeline bends and loops, the finite ride is transformed into a continuous cycle. This intersection represents the core of the speaker's argument, the instant made eternity. He uses the metaphor of life's flower to describe the moment the human soul recognizes it has reached this perfected state. The last ride together concludes that true human achievement isn't found in finished monuments or history, but in the active, eternal pursuit of an ideal.